so I got the battery removed. So now let's pull out this tray all the way out. Okay, so here's what we got. So this positive cable was connected to the positive terminal of the battery, and then it goes to this junction bar over here. Now look at how corroded these bolts are. Okay, and this will cause some voltage drop. Okay, so power comes from this red cable and to this junction bar, and then I believe this cable goes to the alternator, and these other ones go to the fuse box and everything else. You see all this corrosion here? That will definitely cause some voltage drops. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean off all these cables. I'm gonna undo this bolt. I'm gonna remove these cables and clean them off really well, and then I'll bring you guys back up so we can verify everything. So I'll get these cables cleaned and then I'll bring you guys back up. I had to put the bus on the lift so that I can follow the wire that comes from the alternator. So I followed the B positive terminal on the alternator. So the wire that goes to the B positive terminal of the alternator is this wire over here. Okay, this wire, and it was connected to this one. Now it was completely corroded. I was trying to remove the wire from this stud over here so I could clean it, but I couldn't because it's completely stuck. I couldn't even undo it from this stud. So what I did was I cut this wire and then I connected it to this stud over here. Okay, so I cleaned off all these terminals. Now this wire over here will be coming from the battery. So this wire over here is coming from battery positive. Then it's going to send power to this wire that's going to the alternator, and the other wire that goes to the fuse box. Okay, so I cleaned the ends of these cables very well. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to put the battery back on, and then we're going to start the bus to see what happens. Actually, let me show you the other end that I removed. So this end over here is what I cut. So it was going from this side to the cable that goes to the alternator. Okay, so I got these cables cleaned up. I also got these ends cleaned up here, and this one. Okay, so basically this cable over here was causing voltage drop. So the problem was right over here, because I tried removing this stud is just spinning. Let me show you what's happening. So I tried removing it. Watch, it's just spinning. You see that? So I couldn't remove it. Okay, now when I did a little bit of research, they had put this junction bar on because this bus used to have the handicap lift in the back. Okay, the handicap lift for the wheelchair, and it used to have two batteries, one cable. This cable over here, you see this big cable over here goes to the back to power. I don't know if you can see, there's a door over here. Let me show you. This door over here used to be the door for the wheelchair lift. Okay, but we got rid of it, so that system was deleted. Technically we don't need this wire. Okay, now I'm just gonna remove this. Okay, I can get this removed because we don't use it. Okay, so basically the problem here was corrosion at this point. Okay, this is what was causing the charging system from not working. Okay, corrosion at this point was causing voltage drop on the positive side of the alternator. Okay, now that I cleaned up this cable and I got it connected to this stud, I'm gonna put the battery back on, and then we're gonna go inside the vehicle and start the engine. Then we're gonna do a voltage drop test again on the positive side of the alternator to see if our voltage will now be low while the engine is running. So now I'm gonna put the battery back on. So I reinstalled the battery. So now let's go inside the vehicle and start the engine. If cleaning the positive cables at the battery has fixed the issue, when we start the engine and turn on the headlights, our voltage on the mirror should be below 100 millivolts. Okay, now ideally you want it to be below 200 millivolts, but what I'm shooting for is a number below 0.01 volt. Okay, if we see 0.01 or 00 with the accessories on, that would be perfect. That would tell me that there's no voltage drops on the positive side of the alternator, just like we saw on the negative side. So now let's go in the vehicle and start the engine. So I still have my scan tool connected to the vehicle. Alright, so the engine is running. I don't know if you can tell, it's dark here, but this gauge over here, this battery gauge, went up to 14. Okay, so that's good. Now let's look at the scan tool and see what we got. So on the scan tool data pid, as you can see now, we are reading 13.6 volts. So this is fixed, guys. Okay, the problem was a corroded positive wire of the alternator. So this vehicle didn't need an alternator. Okay, now let's go under the hood and look at the multimeter. Let's see what numbers we have on the multimeter now. Alright, so check that out. We have 0.09 volts, so that's awesome. We have this minus number because our test leads are swapped. If I move these around, if I swap these up, you'll see that we won't have a minus sign over there. Okay, so that's good. We have about 90 millivolts. I kind of want this number to be lower than this, but you know, this is good. Actually, now I'm gonna turn on my headlights. Let's load the charging circuit and see what happens. So 13.7 volts is good. Ideally, I want this number to be at 14 or 14 and a half. But let's turn on the headlights and let's also turn on the blower motor. Now with the blower motor on and the headlights turned on, our voltage dropped down a little bit. Okay, now we're dropping down to 13.1. I don't really like this number. This is not good. Okay, with the accessories on, we shouldn't go below 13.5 volts. Let me rev it up a little. Let's go look at the multimeter. Let's see what we got on the multimeter. Oh, check this out. So we have 228 millivolts of voltage drop on the positive side of the alternator. This is still not good, guys. Although I have cleaned the positive cable of the alternator at the alternator and at the battery, but you know what? I think I'm gonna have to replace this positive cable. Okay, remember before we were reading 1.87 volts of voltage drop on the positive side of the alternator. Now after cleaning the positive cable of the alternator, our numbers have significantly dropped, but I don't like this number. Okay, it's still slightly high. I think this cable is bad. We're gonna have to replace this cable. Okay, because if I deliver this bus this way, the battery won't be getting charged well enough. Oh, look at that. You see, now we have 13, so it's going between 13 and 12.9. Yeah, so yeah, this is I mean, we are on the right track. Okay, I know this vehicle doesn't need an alternator. or maybe it may need an alternator, but we have to fix that voltage drop that we have on the positive side of the alternator first. So let me turn off the engine. This is not fully fixed, okay? It's not where I want it to be. Yeah, 12.9 now. Now if I turn off the headlights, this voltage will go up, so watch that. It went up to 13.2. Yeah, this is not fully fixed, okay? We still have a problem. Let me turn this off. I'm gonna show you the charging system wiring diagram again. Let me show you what I did. So before, when we connected our multimeter between the positive terminal of the battery and the B positive terminal of the alternator, with the engine running, we had 1.87 volts, okay? That was the voltage drop that we had. What I did next was I disconnected this cable at this alternator. I cleaned the end of the cable over here. I cleaned the cable's eyelet, and I also cleaned the cable over here at the battery. So after doing that, our voltage drop decreased tremendously. It went from 1.87 volts to 228 millivolts, okay? So, which definitely tells me that our problem is on this leg of the circuit. But right now, although our voltage has increased when you initially start the vehicle, now the alternator is putting out 13.7 volts, but when you turn on the accessories, you turn on the lights and the blower motor, our voltage is going down to 13 volts and all the way down to 12.9 volts. So which tells me that this cable over here, although we've cleaned it, this cable is bad, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna replace this cable. I'm just gonna run a new cable here, and I'll put a fusible link on it, and I will run a new cable from the battery all the way to the alternator. And at that point, we're gonna test it again. If our voltage is still low, then I will feel comfortable replacing the alternator. But I know that our problem is over here, okay? As long as we have that 228 millivolts of voltage drop on this leg of the circuit, that will still alter the charging voltage that the alternator is gonna put out, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is, since I got the vehicle on the lift, I'm kind of just gonna show you what I'm gonna do, but I'm gonna do this off camera. I'm gonna disconnect this cable from the alternator and from the battery. I'm gonna remove it. It's a pretty straight cable and it's not really hard to replace. It's pretty straightforward and easy to do. I'm gonna replace this cable. I'm gonna run a new cable, and after that we're gonna test our repair and see what happens. So let's go under the hood. I'm gonna show you the cable that I'm gonna replace, and then I'll turn off the camera. I will replace this cable over here. After I replace it, I'll bring you guys back up so we can verify the repair. Let's go under the hood. So here is the power supply cable that supplies power to the alternator. So this is the cable I'm going to replace, okay? This cable goes from the alternator, it goes around the engine and down along the frame. It goes somewhere down there and all the way to the back, okay? It goes down along the frame and it comes over here to the battery, okay? Now, if I push the battery over here, that cable, it's this cable over here. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run a new cable. I'm gonna replace this cable completely, and then we will see what happens. I'm gonna run this cable off camera and then I'll bring you guys back up. Let me show you the cable that I'm gonna replace it with. So I did get this cable over here, okay? So I'm gonna use this cable. I'm gonna run this cable from the battery all the way to the alternator. Okay, so I'm gonna do that off camera and then I'll bring you guys back up when I'm done. Alright guys, we are down to the last step. Hopefully this is the last step. I did run a power wire from the alternator back to the battery, okay? Now, here is the old power supply wire to the alternator, okay? I didn't reuse this boot because the wire that I installed is slightly bigger than the one that was there, okay? But it's not gonna cause a problem. So I didn't remove this wire all the way because it goes down the wiring harness that goes to the back of the vehicle, and it's inside the harness. So I didn't want to open up the harness to remove this wire, but I got it disconnected back at the battery over there, at the battery junction. So this over here is not used anymore. I'm just gonna zip tie it up here. Okay, so we got a new wire on the alternator B positive terminal. So I'm gonna raise up the vehicle so I can show you the new wire that I run. So it basically goes from the alternator on top of the engine and along the frame and back to the battery tray. Let me lift up the vehicle so I can show it to you, and then we will do our last test before we wrap up this video. So here is the wire that I have run from the alternator back to the battery. This new wire loom that you see over here is the wire that I have run. Okay, so it goes along the frame, and here it is. Okay, and it goes along here. So I have run it along these other wires, and in there it goes into the battery box. Okay, so this over here is the battery box. Okay, now the other wire, the original wire is this one over here, this one, but it goes into the main harness and up to the engine. So I didn't want to remove it, I'm just gonna leave it there, but it's disconnected on both ends. Okay, so we're good. So this is our new wire. So now let's lower the vehicle and verify our repair. I have lowered the vehicle, so now I'm gonna connect our jumper cables to the battery so we can verify our repair. So we're gonna connect the black lead to the negative side of the battery, and then the red jumper cable to the positive side of the battery. So that's good. So now let's go under the hood. So we're gonna turn on our multimeter. Now we're gonna check this. Since our black lead is connected to the B positive terminal of the alternator, if I touch ground with this, we should read battery voltage. So right there, we are reading minus 12.14, okay? It's showing a negative number because our test leads are backwards. So now I'm gonna reconnect it to the red lead, to the red jumper wire. So right there, we're reading 00, so that's good. So now let's go inside the vehicle and start the engine. Now I have my scan tool connected to the vehicle. So right now with the engine off, we are reading 11.8 volts system voltage. So now I'm gonna start the engine. So let's go to our multimeter first and check out the readings on the multimeter. Check this out. This has significantly dropped. Okay, so this is good, guys. I like this better. I'm just switching these so we don't have a negative number. Okay, so 0.06. Remember, we started with 1.87 volts. Now we have 0.06 volts. So this is 60 millivolts. This is way better. Okay, so now let's go to our scan tool and look at our system voltage that appeared. Now we have 14 volts. So this is fixed, guys. Okay, this is good. So the problem on this vehicle was high resistance on the power supply wire of the alternator. Okay, so now let's turn on the headlights. We're gonna load the charging system. So headlights are on. Now let's turn on the blower motor. So right here, with the charging system loaded, our voltage went down to 13.8 volts. All right, so this is good, guys. This is fixed. Okay, as you can see, there's a huge difference now in terms of voltage. before with the accessories on, our voltage was going down to 11 volts. Okay, so this is fixed. Even the gauge on the dash, let me zoom you guys in so you can see the gauge on the dash is just at 14 volts. Okay, and this is with the blower motor on and the headlights on. Okay, so the headlights are on out there. I'm gonna turn off the headlights and I'm gonna turn off the blower motor. So watch the scan tool. Our voltage is climbing back up. Okay, so that's good, guys. This is fixed. So now I'm gonna turn off the engine so we can wrap up this video. This vehicle needed a power supply wire to the alternator. Okay, the power supply wire to the alternator had high resistance on it, which was causing the charging system to not work. Okay, so now let's turn off the engine so we can wrap up this video. Alright guys, I'm gonna leave it right over here. This is how you test a charging system. In this vehicle, the problem was a bad power supply wire to the alternator. Okay, I hope you liked the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.